Welcome to GeoPods. On today's episode of GeoPods, we're here discussing the recent UNSC resolution which has just been passed. Today, in this conversation, we have with us Harsh Suri, the co founder of GeoStrata, and Sumedh Desai, who is our lead for the Covering China initiative. So, this conversation starts probably from the last 1 or 2 days. There was a lot of talk about how a resolution was going to be tabled in the United Nations Security Council. We even saw 2 or 3 votes going down, a lot of vetoes here and there. The major provisions have not changed, but from whatever the reports out of the UN site is that the basic reforms and the basic structure remains the same. But this time, the only thing which has changed is that the US has not vetoed this resolution. The US has voted to abstain this, and which has led for this draft resolution to be passed by a vote of 14 is to 1, with the one being abstained by the US. So today with us we have the pioneer of these conversations. I think Sumedh is one of the best people we have in the organization when it comes to discussing West Asian politics, especially when it comes to the Israel and Palestine relations. So Sumedh, what are your comments on the latest draft? Like I'm sure you must have seen it already. You all have read it once at least.
So, first of all, thank you, Vaibhav, for having me. I would begin the conversation from the UN resolution that has just passed at the UNSC, wherein the US has abstained. Uh, there have been 5 rounds of UN resolutions sponsored by various different countries, but US had vetoed previously. And there was a talk that if US abstains, the Israelis won't like it, so they were not abstaining. This is the first time that they've used this power of abstention. This comes in the backdrop of Secretary of State Blinken's sixth visit to the region, wherein he went to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Egypt recently. When he landed in Israel, Netanyahu clearly stated that with or without US, the Israelis are going into Rafah. For the Americans, the primary concern is to not put stress on the Egypt-Israel border, Egypt-Gaza border, which is the Philadelphia corridor, because they don't want to see any mass displacement of Palestinians from Gaza into Egypt, which would transfer the resistance from Gaza to the Sinai Peninsula and put the Egypt Israel treaty in jeopardy. Uh, Regarding the resolution that the US brought in just couple of days back, wherein China and Russia vetoed, the resolution intertwined two things that were not seen till now. These two things were the call for a immediate ceasefire and the unconditional release of Israeli hostages, of all the hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. This is for the first time that we have seen that the text of the resolution was left open to interpretation, which is why Russia and China both vetoed the resolution. With regards to the aid, there is a mention in the current resolution as well that you need to open different crossings for aid to be allowed into the Gaza Strip. This comes after the UN Relief and Works Agency chief was denied visa to get into Gaza very recently, while his entire team was allowed to get into Rafah. So this is a kind of a crack between the Israelis and the Americans. I'm sure Harsh is best placed to explain this in detail.
Yeah, so Sumit, thank you for giving the platform to me. I think there's a lot going on in the back door also. As you know, before recording this podcast, we were discussing that it's Blinken's visit, one more visit of Blinken, and Sumit was pointing out a lot of points there also. So I think when it comes to US currently dealing with Israel or currently seeing Israel, they are seeing it, or especially the Biden administration is seeing it through the prism of their personal election year goals. There, I would bet on it that if this was not an election year, things might have been a bit different. Or I think if even if it would have been a midterm, then the things would have been like that. Still, they would have had a lot of pressure on Biden. But right now, it's a peak election year, the general election year. That is a thing that is governing a lot of things, a lot of decisions when we are seeing what is going on. Plus, I think after what has happened in Ukraine, uh, Biden wants, that he has some face saving in terms of foreign policy somewhere, some foreign policy success. Because since Afghanistan, what we have seen, there has not been any major foreign policy success. The exit from Afghanistan was a big problem. Then we have seen that what is happening currently in Ukraine. At starting, it was all rosemary, everything was going good, money was coming in, and they were gaining the land and everything was happening. But now there is a stalemate in terms of what the Congress will do. Now, then moving on, they have recently saved themselves from a government shutdown. So while they can, bare minimum agree on a government shutdown delay, it is very difficult to see for them to regularly keep on supplying Israel and Ukraine weapons while they also have to see Indo-Pacific. So that is a problem. I think a lot of this that is being seen by us, it has larger implications, and there is a lot going on in the background, which we are not able to see obviously because we are not a part of it. But there are clear interpretations. So Webhub, do you have any thoughts on this?
I actually think I have a lot of thoughts on this. Like you can't say it as a disagreement, but I think you guys are being too hopeful out of this resolution. Because from whatever my early years of schooling has been, like something that I've learned about resolutions is the basics which goes down into the your preambulatory clauses and operative clauses, right? And reading the resolution, I think, as Sumedh rightly pointed out, the initial disapproval that we saw from the Russians and the Chinese is pretty reflective in the resolution, because a lot of the wording has not been operative. So there has not been a lot of clarity on how the resolution will be enforced on ground. Also, the wordings regarding the ceasefire has been as of now has been limited to the month of Ramadan. I think it is a part of the Ramadan goodwill that the UN has been trying to implement here. uh, but as you all know, the holy month of Ramadan is already half past, so I don't see any value in that. uh, Apart from that, there has been no mention of ceasefire apart, like following the next after the next 30 days. uh, as far as the humanitarian corridors are concerned, I think that is something which might be worked upon when it comes to the situation on ground. But I personally am not like, I don't see much value in this resolution. I think even US has seen that this is the one which we can let go by our Israeli friends. Like, this is a resolution which we can also like be good when it comes to the face of the world, and also convince our Israeli friends that okay, it doesn't hold much value to the ground. And I think Harsh is very right when he says that this abstain has come at a very substantial uh, period of time, because I think even 3 months before, US would not have abstained it, they would have vetoed it again and again. And even like after the elections, whenever the US elections are done, they're going to veto anything related to ceasefire again and again. So I think the two major reasons of this one was A, either the resolution is not that substantive, or B, is the elections which are coming, and Biden surely wants a foreign policy victory. And it is also a lot about dealing two big things at once. I don't think that no matter how big the US military infrastructure is, no matter how big their diplomacy is, I don't think that they would have expected to handle two such big conflicts in 1 year. And I think that is the primary reason why they're keen on bringing either one of them to a standstill. I think for them, Israel and the Palestine conflict is a much easier one to solve right now, or bring a standstill to. So I had a few questions for Sumedh as well, right? Regarding the same, I saw Sumedh being pretty hopeful out of the resolution that a lot of good things might open up to this. And I totally get his optimism for the region, because that is something which we all want, especially India as a country which commands a big part of this region. We want complete peace in this region. But Sumedh, what do you read out of it? What do you read out of the actual words? Because I don't see a lot of implementation happening on ground. So, what are your opinion? And how do you think Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu has reacted to all this? How many calls would the White House would have gotten after that vote? yesterday.
To be honest, I'm cautiously optimistic. To be very honest, this resolution is a farce. It won't change the realities on the ground because we know that these are dummy resolutions. US did not have approval of the UNSC before invading Iraq, but it anyway did. So this resolution is just US succumbing to the international pressure. They could not hold the international community longer to the fact that you need to condemn the attacks done by Hamas on October 7th, and it did not give a clean sheet to Israel for too long. US realized that they had to, agree to not veto the resolution this time because things are getting out of their hand. They are seeing how Israelis are expanding their operations from Al Shifa to Al Amal to Nasser Hospital now. With regards to the truce, we have seen that the main issue of contention was the number of hostages versus the political prisoners that the Palestinians were demanding. Plus, Palestinians, the Hamas wanted a permanent ceasefire, whereas the Israelis were hell bent on dismantling the remaining Hamas battalions from Rafah, even if there was a ceasefire. So that left a very little gap for maneuvering for the Shin Bet and Mossad both while they were negotiating with Egypt and Qatar in Doha. With regards to the American politics at this moment, we have seen that Netanyahu recently had a discussion with Republican lawmakers, wherein he sought more support. We know that the Democrats are not outrightly supporting Benjamin Netanyahu at this moment. We saw leader Chuck Schumer already calling, he being the senior most Jewish lawmaker in the American policy circle. He said that Netanyahu is doing more damage to Israel than helping Israel's cause, which was reflected by President Biden's uh, address as well. What I guess right now might happen, and as we know from the intel that we are getting right now, is that the Israeli delegation, which was composed of military officials plus intelligence officials, that was slated to visit Washington to discuss alternatives to Rafah invasion, which was what the White House was demanding. They needed alternative plan, uh, like short surgical strikes to dismantle the Hamas tunnels in Rafah. But that visit from the Israeli delegation to Washington has been called off for the moment by the Israeli Prime Minister because, as we know, he was furious. I don't think situation won't. I think situation won't change on the ground because uh, National Security Minister of Israel Ben Gavir and the Finance Minister Smotrich both have said that they will withdraw support from the coalition government if a deal is reached with Hamas before they are dismantled. So right now it's pretty difficult to say where the situation is going. The Israelis are hell bent on invading Rafah, and they might as well uh, take a very aggressive posture to react to this UN resolution.
I think your views are like some of the best when it comes to the West Asian region. So like a lot of OSINT that you have just told, I think that'll be very valuable to the listeners that we have here. Sumedh is excellent when it comes to OSINT related to West Asia, just to tell you guys. And I think even I agree that I think Benjamin himself is under a lot of pressure when it comes to his domestic politics. Even 2 months or 3 months before, we saw a lot of OSINT inputs coming out where we have seen that how the US and Israeli defense as well as political forces were colliding with each other when it came to the plannings of a lot of invasions when it came to Gaza. So I think that is pretty evident. And so something related to this is something I like to talk about with Harsh is you have talked about Joe Biden, and even we have talked about Benjamin. But as Sumedh said, something very valuable is that we have seen that a lot of Israeli lawmakers are also lobbying, if not secretly, if not openly, for Republican candidates, for Republicans being in power. So how do you view that? Like, what do you think the Israelis are hoping out of a Republican White House? Do you think their demands change? Do you think they see more hope or they see less hope out of a Donald Trump administration?
See, they do see more hope, when they think that Trump will return to power, or even if the Senate flips. They are thinking that even if one chamber flips to Republicans, already we have the Senate in Democratic hand, but we have the House in Republican hand, but the majority is very slim, so a lot cannot be done. We have seen that the amount of Israeli lobbies power in terms of basically doing things or getting things done for Israel, from getting funding for Iron Dome to other things. It has always been very ironclad because of the background lobbying system that Israel has through its power packs, super PACs, political packs that they have. But I think even putting a lot of bets or eggs in the basket when it comes to Trump will be an exaggeration, because I really don't think that when Trump comes back, he would be, very open to supporting Israel, doing anything big in the region. I think he will try to recalibrate on what he had already, the Abraham Accords, because I see him as a person who is more committed to his legacy, and he sees that as his legacy. So when we see that many Israeli people and coming and going out of Washington, we recently saw Benny Gantz going there. They are basically convincing them, but they are also convincing them for a non-Trump world also. They are basically playing both sides. Although many Israelis may want that Trump comes back, but many Israelis have this pragmatic approach also that he might not. So that is one thing. The other thing is that I was checking the Western media, and since last many days, the articles that are floating are that Israel has become a geopolitical liability for US in the region, and these are some strong words that I have not heard in last you know 5 6 years of being connected to geopolitics. This shows that there has been a change. There has been a change because US wants to be more involved in Indo-Pacific. They don't want to involve themselves or get their two aircraft carriers for matter, involved here in the Mediterranean. So I think they are seeing it as a liability, because for them they want Middle East on their own side rather than keeping a big vacuum. It is very cool that for everyone to say that America wants to get isolated again or get out of the region, but they don't want to leave the region to Russia or China at all. So their actions might be opposite sometimes, but they also understand that in order to keep stability in the region, they need to be involved somehow. But that can't come at the risk of letting Israel do whatever it wants. So there's this one thing that I believe in US: whosoever becomes the president, the mainstay of the policy remains the same. And the mainstay of the policy is countering China. And for that, they have to create stability. So even if Trump comes back, there's not much that they should wish for. That's what I think. And here is my question to Sumedh. And the question is that, do you see that, with Blinken's multiple visits to West Asia, do you see that after this resolution, and this resolution being a resolution where America has abstained, do you think anything else being done on America's side now in the region? Because now what is more, more thing that we need to look at is that what America will do next in terms of Israel. Because they didn't do much when it came to this particular resolution. So now what next? So what do you think they will be doing? What is the future prospect from here?
See, I just read a couple of articles in the morning. Uh, they stated that the US held secret talks with Iran in Oman last week to rein in on the axis of resistance. This comes after there have been reported drone incursions on at Haifa in Tel Aviv. and at the southern Israeli city of Eilat. Uh, this is done by the Islamic resistance in Iraq and the Houthis. With regards to your question, I think the Americans don't have much option at the moment. Uh, Biden has hinted that he might consider blocking aid to Israel, but I mean, I am not pretty much sure how much that would go through. And as you said, that the relations between Israel and US are genuinely at its low right now, with even some Western media claiming that the public tension between the US and Israel has little precedent in Israel's history as a close US ally since its founding in 1948. This brings me to the question of humanitarian aid, because that is where the Americans have their legitimacy. China and Russia have not been able to get humanitarian aid pushed into Gaza as much as the Americans have.
Yes.
But the question is, there have been bureaucratic lethargies from the Israeli side, which has blocked aid from going through Rafah border and then Karam Shalom. So the Americans planned the maritime corridors from Cyprus, and we have seen the first deliveries have happened. They've also airdropped uh, aid to the Gazans, but that is still not enough. So my question to you is: do you think the American administration can block military supplies to Israel?
See, I think for now that question is not on the administration. Like the administration doesn't have the major power in deciding, that aid should be given to Israelis or not. It depends on how well the Trump-backed Republicans and the Democrats come together in saying that, should we give them aid or not?
Hmm.
Uh, that is the point here, because right now the president is powerless in terms of Congress. Congress is basically running like a slow snail. They can't even decide on basic, food bills.
Yes,
So it's very difficult to see that will they approve any big thing, because right now when it comes to the arms and ammunitions की funding, जो पहला हकदार है, the first country that needs to get it is Ukraine. Otherwise, whatever America did there in last 2 years, it will get back to the place where it
yes,
started.
yes.
So I think the Congress supplying both of them weapons will be quite difficult. But one place where Israel must have optimism is that the weapons that they are supplying to Ukraine are different, and the weapons that they are supplying to Israel are different. That is the only place where there is safety. This is a very logistical answer, because this is
Yes,
true. So
yes.
that is where we are seeing it. Otherwise, there is not much. Like I can't see US giving anything big right now.
But
Sanctioning.
we have seen that the Congress has gone for a recess till 8th of April, and the
Mhm.
$95 billion aid package that gives aid to Ukraine, Taiwan, and Israel, along with few Pacific countries,
Mhm.
that package has been blocked.
Mhm.
So the Israelis are lobbying to the Republicans to move that package. The Republicans are considering to move that package if the aid to Ukraine is concessional and it is given as a loan. But the Ukrainians and the Biden administration is not ready to give it as a loan. They are just ready to give it as aid, because they know that it's not useful to burden the Ukrainian administration at this
Mhm.
moment.
But one problem here is that one thing that we are forgetting here is that any Republican decision in this year will have to have something regarding the border, the southern border.
Yes,
So even if Republicans are saying, okay, we are voting at the bill, right? The aid. But do they have the guarantee that after that there will be a bill on border, a single bill on border, which is, according to me, and Vaibhav can pitch in this. I don't think so. The current American situation can pass a single border bill, a bill that only mentions the border. The best way to get a decision on border for Republicans is, and a big face saving for Trump before the elections is, that they get a border, kind of a border funding through a bill that is dedicated to Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan. That is the only way they can get the border bill, because I cannot even imagine a single bill that is dedicated to border being passed by the Congress. The current state, it might change, but the current state is very polarized when it comes to border. So, Vaibhav, do you have anything to say on that?
I think to be fair to uh, Biden, you mentioning a border, I think anything, even mentioning aid, any kind of aid, Biden has been pretty unsuccessful in getting it passed through any houses. So it has not delivered in financial aid, healthcare aid, or anything else. So I think even that is a very big problem for them. And as you guys were previously talking about the prospects of Mr. Trump coming back in and him trying to bring back his legacy, I think if you wake me up from sleep 3 a.m. in the morning and ask me 10 times that which of the two conflicts is Mr. Trump more likely to bring to a standstill to, I think 9 out of 10 times I will choose Israel and Palestine. Because I think he will be 10 times more motivated to bring a standstill to this than Russia Ukraine, because I think Russia is a much more bigger uh, rival, a much more bigger enemy for the US than protecting Israel's interests. And something which I was very moved by was your mentioning of how a lot of academia in the West has changed when it comes to their opinions on Israel as a state. We saw like the only country which I see still bearing that flag has is Germany in the modern day, because their parliament and their leaders have been pretty strong on their values against Nazism, and they have said all out that Israel, we have to protect Israel, we have to give everything to protect Israel. But for what I'm worried is the state of Israel in the next 10 or 15 years, as the demographics or as the voter percentage in more Western countries change. Because we have seen increasingly that the US incentive of protecting Israel as a state has gone down, and that too exponentially. And when it comes to countering China, then it is a whole other issue for Israel. I think the major debate that the Israeli politicians or the Israeli community itself has to question their leaders is how do they remain relevant in a world of ever changing geopolitics. Because for them, American politics is more valuable than any defense system, any weaponry, any military intelligence services. Because without America on its back, I don't think Israel has not been able to survive as a state without having US at its back. So I think that is a very self-sustaining, that is a very important question for Israel as a state, that how do they solve this issue.
That is the
So
most fundamental question.
most
And
fundamental
it is
question.
interesting that Vaibhav mentioned about the population and the demographics. It took me back to what Yair Lapid told regarding the Haredim, the ultra orthodox students that study Torah. He said that there are around 66,000 students who are of the conscription age, who get military exemption every year. And as we know that the defense minister has not approved exemption for this year. So that is the issue that is polarizing and dividing the Israeli society, because the Israeli citizens who are not ultra orthodox have to send their kids to fight. And with the cloud of war gaining steam on the northern border as well, there are chances that you need to recruit the ultra orthodox students as well, which, according to Yair Lapid, might form 105 new battalions, which is around 66,000 students. So that is very important to consider when we see how the domestic public opinion within Israel is getting shaped in the backdrop of several protests done by the families of hostages, plus normal Israeli citizens against the Netanyahu government.
Yeah, thank you for those inputs, Sumit. And like after these input, even I would like to move to you for like the conclusion. But before going in that direction, like something that I would request you to ponder upon, because you are the behemoth when it comes to the West Asian politics, is that again the same question: how does Israel plan to remain relevant in the eyes of Western countries or the US? Because I think that is very important for their self defense and their existence as a nation. Or do they think that they rely on more things like the Abraham Accord? Do you think they invest more and more in their military or their intelligence services? Because I don't see that as a solution for any state in the longer run. You can just keep on pushing money into your defense and intelligence agencies, but until or unless you have a neighborhood where you feel uh, protected, or where you feel to have good enough relations with your neighbors to stop a war, I don't think anything else can solve you that issue. And also I would love for you to answer that: how does the Indian foreign policy view it? Like what do you think India wants in the region? Because India is also increasingly, like, it's right in the center when it comes to West Asian politics and the whole Indo-Pacific region politics. So where do you think India is placing its bets on, Sumit?
So I will answer the first part of the question. With regards to your question, how does Israel stay relevant? The Americans had a plan in mind, which was to keep the normalization hopes with Saudi Arabia alive. How? How would you do that? The Saudis demanded that they just needed a political assurance from the Israelis that the two-state solution was not dead. This is because they had to convince their own population that they were doing enough for the Palestinians. They were not asking for concrete steps, they were just asking for political assurances, which the Israelis are not giving. The current Israeli dispensation is not giving, with the rhetoric of complete security control from the river to the sea. Uh, so, how does Israel stay relevant? First of all, the Americans wanted a negative peace, wanted to establish negative peace by having an immediate ceasefire. Then their idea was to build a deconfliction mechanism wherein they could effect a regime change in Tel Aviv, for which they invited Benny Gantz behind the back of Netanyahu without his approval, to explore various options to form a new government which does not have ultra orthodox and Netanyahu in it. But they did not succeed because there was no negative peace, there was no ceasefire to begin with. The Israelis had a counter plan. If there was a peace in Gaza, if there was a truce in Gaza, they would have escalated on the northern border with Hezbollah. What the Americans want right now is Netanyahu out of power. They want Netanyahu out of power, and they want a moderate coalition government in place which can at least give political assurances which they can use to for advance on the normalization deal with the Saudis. Once the normalization deal with the Saudis advances, American diplomacy in the region will get a new life. It will get a new energy. Plus, the Israelis, in the eyes of the international community, will get some recognition that the moderate Muslim world is ready to recognize Israel even after what they've been doing for the last 5 months. This was the initial plan, but this has not succeeded because Netanyahu is fighting for his political survival very hard right now. With regards to the Indian foreign policy, as our foreign minister has explicitly stated that terrorism cannot be justified, humanitarian assistance cannot be conditional, it has to flow in, and two-state solution has to be the final solution. We have to look for avenues to implement the two-state solution. This is pretty much the Indian position. With regards to what is happening around the Red Sea and different parts of the region, India is countering it with its own political influence, but India is not engaging directly with any concerned parties in the region at the moment.
Yeah, I think you have answered both of my questions pretty fabulously. I'm actually impressed by how much knowledge you have of the region, especially when it came to the regime change plans that the US might have in the region. So I think we have reached the end of this podcast. Thank you guys for joining me at such a short notice. As soon as I saw the news that the resolution has been passed, I knew the two people I had to call, like, bring on this call to discuss this. Thank you, Sumit. Thank you, Harsh, for joining me this late in the night. And I hope peace prevails in the region in the future, because that is something which is of utmost importance, especially for India. Thank you guys for tuning in for this episode.